When I inherited my uncle's 1,500-acre Colorado lake ranch, I thought I'd won the lottery, until I arrived to find some HOA queen had built a $3.2 million mansion on my shoreline and was charging me $500 to park on my own property. Beverly Sinclair stepped out of her white Mercedes like she owned the place. She waved around fake 1880s mining documents, claiming the entire lakefront belonged to her community. I could see her helicopter parked on the dock where Uncle Charlie taught my kids to fish for 40 years, while her security guards blocked my access road. Fresh concrete smell poisoning the mountain air. Beverly's voice carrying across the water, explaining how my family's land now belonged to her HOA. But what this property-stealing Karen didn't know? I'm a land surveyor, and those pretty historical papers were about to meet some very inconvenient government coordinates, right in front of 200 wealthy witnesses. What would you do if someone made you pay rent on your own inherited paradise? Let me back up and tell you about Uncle Charlie. He was the black sheep of our family, never married, lived alone on this massive ranch he'd bought back in the 80s. When my divorce got ugly last year, Charlie became my refuge. My kids Emma and Tyler, 12 and 15, would spend summers up there learning to fish and getting away from all the custody drama. Charlie passed suddenly in February, massive heart attack while feeding the horses. The will was simple, everything to me. I'm Sam Hendricks, 46 years old, civil engineer and land surveyor by trade. Been through a nasty divorce, fighting for custody of my kids, and this ranch represented the only stable home they'd ever known. The gravel crunching under my truck tires on that familiar access road should have been comforting. The crisp mountain air that used to smell only of wildflowers and lake water. Instead, I heard the electronic beep of some security gate slamming shut ahead of me. That's when I met Beverly Sinclair. Picture this, 61 years old, former real estate attorney turned HOA dictator. White Mercedes G-Wagon, $500 hiking outfit that had clearly never seen dirt, like a suburban safari costume for hunting property lines instead of big game. She drives up in that pristine vehicle and steps out like she owns the place, which, according to her, she did. "You must be Charlie's nephew," she says, not even introducing herself. "I'm Beverly Sinclair, president of Lakeside Estates HOA. I'm afraid there's been some confusion about property boundaries." She pulls out these official-looking documents with gold seals and ribbons, claims the entire shoreline always belonged to the community per 1880s mining agreements, points to her mansion, this architectural monstrosity with floor-to-ceiling windows, wraparound decks, and that helicopter pad I mentioned. "Your uncle was a lovely man," Beverly continues, "but he never understood the historical precedent here. This shoreline has been community property since the mining days. We've been maintaining it as a public trust." Public trust? There were armed security guards at the gate. Her private marina had a sign reading, "Members Only." The only thing public about this setup was Beverly's audacity. I'm holding Uncle Charlie's survey equipment, the same gear he'd used for 40 years in the Forest Service before buying this place. The touch of those worn metal instruments in the truck cab reminded me of all those summer afternoons he'd spent teaching me about property lines, easements, and boundary law. "Ma'am," I said, "I think there might be some mistake. This is my property now, all 1,500 acres, according to the deed." Beverly's smile turned ice cold. "I'm afraid you'll find the legal situation more complicated than that. These historical mining rights supersede any modern property claims. I suggest you consult an attorney." She hands me a business card. Beverly Sinclair, escrower with some fancy law firm letterhead I'd never heard of. Then she gets back in her Mercedes and drives away, leaving me standing there on my own land like some confused tourist. The sound of Beverly's security gate closing with that electronic beep echoed across the lake. I walked over to touch those worn survey stakes Uncle Charlie had shown me years ago, now spray-painted with "community property" in bright orange letters. My kids were supposed to visit in 2 weeks. Emma had been counting down the days since Charlie's funeral, asking when we could go back to their lake. Tyler, dealing with typical teenage attitude, had actually seemed excited about something for once. Now I'm staring at a mansion where our family campsite used to be, wondering how I'm going to explain to 2 kids that their safe haven got stolen by some lady with fabricated documents and a helicopter. But here's the thing about being a land surveyor. You learn to trust measurements over smooth talk. And Beverly's story just didn't add up. 2 days later, Beverly escalated. Big time. I'm sitting in my hotel room in town, couldn't even stay on my own property, when the sheriff shows up with papers. Beverly had filed a restraining order claiming I was an unstable veteran threatening community safety. The documents referenced those same 1880s mining agreements, now notarized and official-looking. The restraining order barred me from 60% of my inherited property, everything within 500 feet of the shoreline, effectively the most valuable part of the ranch. I had to cancel Emma and Tyler's visit. Their mom was already looking for excuses to cut my custody time, and Dad's fighting with armed HOA people wasn't going to help my case. That musty smell hit me when I first examined Beverly's antique documents. You know that smell. Old paper, aged ink, historical authenticity. Except these papers reeked of fresh toner, like they'd just come off a laser printer. Something wasn't right. I called Derek Martinez, my buddy from engineering school who now runs a surveying company in Denver. Derek, I need a favor. Can you recommend a forensic document examiner? Dude, what kind of trouble are you in? The expensive kind. Someone's claiming my property with fake historical documents. Derek knew a guy, retired FBI document specialist who'd testified in federal court hundreds of times. Cost me $800 I couldn't afford, but when Dr. Peterson examined Beverly's mining agreements, he started laughing. Mr. Hendricks, these documents are fraudulent, badly fraudulent. How can you tell? Well, first, they're printed on paper with a 2019 watermark. Second, the font is Times New Roman, which wasn't invented until 1991. Third, the notary stamps are from a local UPS store. He pointed to microscopic details I'd never have noticed. Whoever made these downloaded a template online and tried to age them with coffee stains. Here's something most people don't know about document fraud. Modern forensic techniques make fake historical papers surprisingly easy to spot. Watermarks, font analysis, and ink chemistry don't lie. Even if someone ages paper artificially, there are dozens of telltale signs that show up under proper examination. I felt that first spark of hope since this nightmare began. Beverly had made a critical error, but I needed more than document fraud to win this fight. I needed to prove where the actual property boundaries were. Derek, I said, how fast can you do a professional boundary survey on 1,500 acres? For you, 2 weeks if I push it. But Sam, that's expensive. We're talking GPS equipment, government benchmark verification, the works. Do it, whatever it costs. While Derek organized the survey, I drove back out to confront Beverly. Found her at the mansion, directing some landscaping crew installing a fountain. A fountain. On my property. Mrs. Sinclair, I called out, walking up the driveway I wasn't legally allowed to use. She turned around, designer sunglasses reflecting the lake. Mr. Hendricks, you're in violation of a court order. About those mining documents. Are you recording this conversation? She stepped back, suddenly defensive. Ma'am, I just want to understand the legal basis for your claims. I've already explained the historical precedent. If you can't accept that this land belongs to the community, perhaps you should consider selling your remaining acreage to someone more cooperative. The landscaping crew kept working, installing that fountain like I wasn't even there. The sound of drilling into bedrock echoed across what used to be Uncle Charlie's quiet paradise. But I noticed something else. Beverly kept glancing toward a surveyor working near the mansion's foundation. Her own surveyor taking measurements and driving stakes. Planning some additions? I asked. Routine property maintenance, she said quickly. Nothing that concerns you. That's when I realized Beverly wasn't just trying to steal my shoreline. She was preparing to expand her illegal construction. The fountain was just the beginning. I spotted equipment staged behind the mansion. Concrete mixers, excavation machinery, building materials covered with tarps. I took photos of everything before leaving. If Beverly wanted to play the documentation game, I'd give her more documentation than she bargained for. Walking back to my truck, I called Derek again. Change of plans. I need that survey done in 1 week, not 2. Sam, that's going to cost whatever it takes. And Derek, when you're done, I want the most official, unquestionable survey in Colorado history. The kind that stands up in federal court. You planning something dramatic? Something like that. Beverly's next move was pure evil genius. 3 days after our fountain conversation, I got a call from the county clerk. My access road, the same road Uncle Charlie had used for 40 years, was being declared abandoned due to non-use. Beverly had somehow convinced county officials that nobody had driven it in decades. But I was just on that road last week, I told the clerk. Ma'am says this road hasn't been used for years. We have documentation showing abandonment. What documentation? Historical records indicating the access was temporary related to mining operations that ended in the 1890s. More of Beverly's fake history, but this time she'd gotten it officially filed with the county. I drove out to find an electronic gate system blocking my only access to the ranch. This thing looked like something from a missile silo, complete overkill for blocking access to land that legally belonged to someone else anyway. Keypad entry, cameras, the works. My property had become an isolated island. Emergency services couldn't reach it. My kids couldn't visit. Beverly had effectively trapped me out of my own inheritance using bureaucracy as a weapon. But here's where her plan backfired. Being cut off from the ranch forced me to explore the property boundaries more carefully. I spent 2 days hiking through overgrown areas with Uncle Charlie's old GPS unit, looking for the original survey markers. Found them scattered throughout the forest, concrete monuments with brass caps placed by government surveyors in the 1920s. Each one had GPS coordinates etched in metal, coordinates that told a very different story than Beverly's version. Using Uncle Charlie's survey equipment, I documented every marker with photographs and measurements. The brass caps showed exact coordinates, longitude, latitude, elevation. This was data that connected directly to government databases. Information Beverly couldn't fake or manipulate. And that's when I discovered the truth that would destroy her empire. Beverly's mansion, marina, helicopter pad, and those new construction sites sat entirely outside any platted HOA territory. Every single structure was built on pure wilderness that belonged to me. I called Derek with coordinates. Run these through the government database. I think Beverly built her whole operation on the wrong land. Give me 20 minutes. While waiting, I started sketching a rough map. If my calculations were correct, Beverly's mansion was 300 feet onto my property, not close to the boundary line, deep into my land, nowhere near any legitimate HOA territory. Derek called back, excitement in his voice. Dude, this isn't even close. Her mansion is completely on your side of the boundary. Like, embarrassingly far onto your land. How sure are you? I'd bet my surveyor's license on it. These coordinates don't lie. They're tied to federal benchmarks. That's when I realized something important about property law. Original survey markers are legal gold. They establish boundaries that supersede all later claims, especially fake ones. When government surveyors placed those brass monuments in the 20s, they created permanent legal reference points that no HOA document, no matter how official looking, could override. But knowing the truth and proving it in court were different things. Beverly had lawyers, money, and apparently enough political connections to manipulate county records. I had survey equipment and a stubborn streak. That evening, I started planning something more dramatic. Walking back through the forest, I noticed the creek that ran between my confirmed property line and Beverly's access road, about 6 feet wide, maybe 3 feet deep. Uncle Charlie used to have a simple wooden bridge there, nothing fancy, just planks over the water. The bridge was gone now, probably removed during Beverly's improvements. But the foundation posts were still there, concrete footings on both sides of the creek. I'm a civil engineer. I understand hydraulics, weight distribution, and mechanical systems. Looking at those foundation posts, an idea started forming, something that would solve my access problem and give Beverly a very public lesson about property rights. The creek was entirely on my land. If I rebuilt the bridge, I could control who used it. And if I built it with certain engineering features, well, that bridge could become very selective about which vehicles it supported. I spent that night researching hydraulic systems online. Retractable bridges weren't complicated, just a matter of cylinders, valves, and timing. Build something that looked permanent but could disappear at the push of a button. Beverly wanted to play games with my property access? Fine. But this particular game had rules she didn't understand yet. I called Derek one more time. How fast can you get me a complete, certified boundary survey? The kind that gets filed with the county recorder and becomes public record? 1 week if I push it hard. Why? Because I'm going to need documentation that stands up in court. And Derek, when you're done, I want Beverly to know exactly how much trouble she's in. What are you planning? Just a little civil engineering project, nothing too complicated. Beverly's paranoia kicked into overdrive after I started documenting her illegal construction. She organized what she called a community safety patrol, middle-aged retirees driving golf carts with walkie-talkies, pretending to be some kind of volunteer police force. The whir of golf cart motors echoed across the lake at all hours like mechanical mosquitoes. They'd circle the perimeter of my property, taking photos, writing down license plate numbers of anyone who even slowed down near the access road. Beverly spread rumors about me being a dangerous veteran with PTSD, who posed a threat to the peaceful community. Never mind that I'd never served in the military. Accuracy wasn't the point. The goal was character assassination. The strategy worked. My ex-wife Jennifer called, furious. "Sam, what the hell is going on up there? I got a call from some HOA lady saying you're harassing elderly residents with surveying equipment." "Jennifer, that's not what's happening. Social Services is opening an investigation. If you can't handle your own property disputes without involving the kids, maybe we need to revisit custody arrangements." Emma and Tyler's summer visit, the thing I'd been fighting for since the divorce, was slipping away. Beverly had turned my inheritance into a liability that threatened my relationship with my own children, but her patrol made a critical mistake. I installed trail cameras throughout the property, motion-activated units designed for hunting, $49 each at the sporting goods store, but they captured something worth far more than money. Beverly's golf cart brigade was trespassing on Federal Bureau of Land Management property adjacent to my ranch. The coordinates were clear. They'd been driving across federally protected land for weeks, leaving tire tracks and disturbing wildlife habitat. Here's something most people don't know about federal land trespassing. It carries automatic $5,000 fines plus criminal charges, even for community safety activities. The federal government doesn't care about your HOA authority when you're damaging protected ecosystems. I copied the trail camera footage and GPS coordinates, then called the federal rangers. "I have documentation of repeated trespassing on BLM land, multiple vehicles, multiple incidents. Sir, we take those violations very seriously. Can you provide exact coordinates and evidence? I have video footage with timestamps and GPS data for every incident." While the federal investigation started, I focused on my own project. The bridge across the creek needed to look completely legitimate, something Beverly and her patrol would use without suspicion. I spent 3 days building what appeared to be a permanent wooden bridge. Solid timber construction, proper railings, painted surface that looked like it had been there for years. But underneath, hidden by the creek banks, I installed a hydraulic system that could retract the center span in 30 seconds. The engineering was straightforward. 2 hydraulic cylinders connected to a control panel I hid behind a tree. The bridge supported normal traffic perfectly, but when I triggered the hydraulics, the center section would drop down into the creek bed, leaving a 6-foot gap that no vehicle could cross. Testing the system at midnight, watching the bridge disappear and reappear like some kind of magic trick, I felt that same satisfaction Uncle Charlie used to get from solving complicated survey problems. Every measurement precise, every component functioning exactly as designed. But I needed the perfect moment to spring this trap. Beverly was too paranoid now, too defensive. I needed her feeling confident, victorious, completely unprepared for what was coming. That's when I learned about her charity gala. Beverly had been planning this event for months, a fundraiser for community preservation that would bring 200 wealthy donors to her mansion. Local TV news coverage, county commissioners attending, the works. She'd sent invitations describing the event as celebrating our successful protection of historical community property against outside interference. In other words, a victory party for stealing my land. The invitation described gourmet catering, wine tasting, and tours of the beautifully restored lakefront community space. Beverly was literally charging people to visit property she'd stolen, using the money to fund more legal challenges against me. Perfect. I called Derek to confirm survey completion. "Everything filed with the county?" "Official as it gets. Your property boundaries are now public record, backed by federal benchmark coordinates. Beverly's mansion is documented as sitting entirely on your land." "Good. Because in 3 days, she's throwing a party to celebrate stealing it. Sam, please tell me you're not planning anything stupid. Define stupid. Anything that gets you arrested." "I'm not planning to break any laws, Derek, but Beverly's about to learn the difference between actual property rights and fake historical documents." "What do you need from me?" "Just be ready to explain some survey maps on very short notice." Derek's survey results changed everything. I met him at a coffee shop in town, away from Beverly's patrol network. He spread the official documents across a corner table. Maps, coordinate lists, legal descriptions that would make any property attorney weep with joy. Sam, this is better than we hoped. Beverly's entire empire sits on your land. Not close to the boundary, completely, undeniably on your property. The numbers were devastating. Beverly's mansion, 318 feet onto my land. The marina, 270 feet. The helicopter pad, 412 feet. The new fountain sheet installed, 508 feet from the actual property line. But here's the beautiful part, Derek continued, pointing to satellite overlays. None of these structures sit on any platted HOA territory. The actual HOA boundaries are way up the hill, nowhere near the lake. Beverly built everything on pure wilderness. How is that possible? She never bothered to survey before building, just assumed the lakefront belonged to her community because it looked nice. Classic case of wishful thinking versus actual property law. Derek pulled out Beverly's original construction permits, public records he'd obtained from the county. Look at the coordinates she filed for these permits. They don't match where anything actually got built. She told the county she was building in one location, then constructed everything somewhere completely different. That's permit fraud. Gets better. Look at her tax assessments. The property tax record showed Beverly paying taxes on 12 acres, the actual size of her legitimate HOA parcel. But her mansion and improvements covered nearly 40 acres of my land. She'd been avoiding property taxes on stolen real estate for 3 years. Derek, what am I looking at in terms of damages? Conservatively, $180,000 in trespassing fees at fair market rental rates, plus demolition costs if you want the structures removed, plus tax fraud penalties that go back years. But the document that changed my entire strategy was Beverly's own survey, the one I'd seen her crews working on during our fountain conversation. She'd commissioned a legitimate boundary survey after building her mansion, probably to prepare legal defenses. Her own surveyor had confirmed what Derek discovered. Beverly's construction was entirely illegal, but instead of correcting the situation, she'd buried the survey results and doubled down on her fake historical claims. She knew, I said, reading the survey report. Beverly knew she built on my property and she kept expanding anyway. Gets worse. Look at this. Derek showed me permit applications Beverly had filed just last week. Plans for a second guest house, an expanded marina, and a swimming pool. All on my land. All based on the same fabricated mining rights documents. She's not just stealing property, she's planning to develop it into a private resort. The metallic taste of adrenaline filled my mouth as the full scope of Beverly's scheme became clear. This wasn't a boundary dispute or misunderstanding. This was systematic theft of a 40-acre lakefront development site, using fake documents and legal intimidation to keep the real owner from interfering. Beverly's charity gala wasn't just a celebration, it was a sales pitch. She was showing potential investors what could be built with unlimited access to community property that happened to include my entire shoreline. Derek, I need you to file this survey with the county recorder immediately. Make it public record. Already done. As of this morning, your property boundaries are official, certified, and impossible to dispute. Good. Because on Saturday night, Beverly's throwing a party for 200 people on stolen property, and every single one of those guests is going to drive across my land to get there. Sam, what are you thinking? I'm thinking Beverly invited the perfect witnesses to her own downfall. Local news, county officials, wealthy donors, exactly the audience she needs to watch her empire collapse. In the bridge you've been building? The bridge is going to give everyone a very clear demonstration of who actually owns this property. Derek folded up the survey maps, understanding dawning on his face. You're going to strand 200 people at Beverly's illegal party. I'm going to show 200 people that Beverly built her mansion on land she never owned, with documentation they can't argue with and consequences they can't ignore. This is either brilliant or completely insane. Sometimes those are the same thing. The next 72 hours were pure engineering poetry. I had Derek's survey filed with the county, making my property boundaries public record backed by federal coordinates that no fake mining document could dispute. I had trail camera footage of Beverly's patrol trespassing on federal land. I had her own buried survey proving she knew about the illegal construction. Everything I needed to destroy her credibility. I just needed the perfect stage. Beverly's charity gala would bring exactly the right audience. 200 wealthy donors in $80,000 cars, all driving across my property to reach her stolen mansion. county commissioners, local TV news, and Beverly herself making speeches about community property rights while standing on land she'd never owned. But the trap had to be perfect. No room for error, no chance for Beverly to escape consequences or blame someone else. First, the bridge mechanics. I spent Tuesday night fine-tuning the hydraulic system, testing every component multiple times. The beauty of the design was its simplicity. 2 cylinders controlled by a single switch hidden behind an oak tree 50 feet away. When activated, the center span would drop into the creek bed in 30 seconds, creating a 6-foot gap no vehicle could cross. I used aircraft-grade hydraulic fluid and commercial construction cylinders rated for 20,000 pounds each. This wasn't some jury-rigged contraption. It was precision engineering designed to function flawlessly under pressure. The kind of system that would work perfectly whether I was calm or running on pure adrenaline. Wednesday, I consulted with a property attorney in Denver. Cost me $500 I couldn't spare, but I needed to understand my legal rights exactly. Mr. Hendricks, if someone has built structures on your property without permission, you have the right to demand immediate removal. No notice required, no grace period. Colorado law is very clear about this. What if they claim historical rights? Fraudulent documents create no legal rights whatsoever. If you can prove the historical claims are false, which your forensic examination already has, then the trespassing becomes willful and deliberate. What about the people attending their party? If they're on your property without permission, they're trespassing. You have every right to control access to your own land, including cutting off that access if people are there illegally. Here's something most people don't understand about property rights. Once someone builds on your land without permission, you can demand immediate removal regardless of how much they spent or how long the structure has existed. The law doesn't reward people for expensive trespassing. Thursday, I recruited my witnesses. Sheriff Martinez had been dealing with Beverly's complaints about me for weeks. He was eager to see documentation that proved who was actually causing problems. Sam, if you can prove she's been filing false reports about property boundaries, I can charge her with misuse of emergency services. I can prove that and a lot more. What do you need from me? Just be available Saturday evening. With media present and everything well documented, this should resolve itself pretty cleanly. I also contacted Sarah Schuyler, the reporter from Channel 9 who'd covered other property disputes in the county. She'd been frustrated with Beverly's PR spin on the story, always eager to expose the truth when someone was manipulating local media. Sarah, what would you say to a story about fake historical documents, federal land violations, and permit fraud? All documented, all provable. I'd say that sounds like exactly the kind of story we've been looking for. Friday afternoon, I made my final preparations. Trail cameras repositioned for perfect angles on the bridge and mansion. Survey stakes with bright orange flags placed along the actual property line, making the boundary visually obvious. Legal documents sealed in waterproof cases. Most importantly, I called Emma and Tyler. "Dad, are we still going to get our lake back?" Emma asked. "Tomorrow night, sweetheart. Tomorrow night everything gets fixed. What about the mean lady with the helicopter? The mean lady is about to learn an important lesson about telling the truth." Tyler, trying to sound unimpressed but clearly invested. "Dad, you're not going to do anything stupid, are you?" "Define stupid." "Anything that gets you arrested or makes Mom more angry." "I'm not planning to break any laws, but Beverly's about to discover that building on someone else's property has consequences." Saturday evening arrived with perfect weather, clear skies, calm winds, ideal conditions for outdoor events and helicopter landings. I positioned myself with full view of the bridge and mansion, Derek's survey maps in hand, watching luxury vehicles arrive for Beverly's victory celebration. The irony was beautiful. Beverly had invited the perfect witnesses to document her own downfall. Time to remind everyone who actually owned this property. Beverly's desperation kicked into overdrive when she realized I wasn't backing down. Thursday morning, I got a call that changed everything. Jim Patterson, the county assessor, sounded nervous as hell. "Mr. Hendricks, I need to report an incident involving your property assessment. Someone approached me yesterday offering payment to adjust your boundary lines in our tax records." "Payment?" $10,000 cash. Said it would just be a small adjustment to reflect historical community property rights. I told her I couldn't falsify government records, and she suggested everyone has a price. Beverly had tried to bribe a county official, in writing, with witnesses. "Jim, did you document this conversation?" I reported it to the state ethics board immediately. We record all assessment meetings for exactly this reason. Ma'am didn't know she was being recorded when she made the offer. The metallic taste of adrenaline hit my mouth again, but this time it was excitement rather than anger. Beverly had just committed a felony, attempted bribery of a government official. State investigators would be very interested in those recordings, but that was just the beginning of her unraveling. I spent Thursday evening reviewing Beverly's property tax records going back 5 years, documents that were public information available online. What I found was systematic fraud that went far beyond my property dispute. Beverly had been reporting different acreage numbers to different agencies for years, told the tax assessor she owned 12 acres to minimize property taxes, told the insurance company she owned 45 acres to maximize coverage, told the state environmental agency she owned 8 acres to avoid wetland regulations. Here's something about tax fraud that most people don't realize. When you lie about property boundaries to avoid taxes, you create a paper trail that's almost impossible to hide. Every false filing compounds the original crime, and the penalties multiply exponentially. I called Derek with the evidence. Can you cross-reference Beverly's tax filings with the actual survey boundaries? Already working on it. Sam, this is worse than we thought. She's been claiming different property sizes depending on which agency she's dealing with. That's federal tax fraud if any of those filings went to the IRS. Which they did, for property tax deductions. Then we're talking about federal charges, not just local violations. Friday morning brought Beverly's most desperate move yet. I was at the bridge, testing the hydraulic system one final time when I heard helicopters overhead. Not Beverly's personal helicopter, news choppers. Beverly had called local TV stations claiming I was planning terrorist attacks on community property and was building explosive devices near the lake. 3 news crews showed up expecting to film some kind of domestic extremist situation. Instead, they found me with survey equipment and legitimate construction tools, working on my own property with proper permits. When reporters asked about the explosive devices, I showed them the hydraulic bridge system. "Ma'am, this appears to be standard construction equipment," the Channel 9 reporter said to Beverly, who'd arrived in her Mercedes looking frazzled. "Can you explain what you meant by explosive devices?" "He's building some kind of trap," Beverly insisted, "designed to hurt innocent community members." "Sir, can you explain what you're building here?" the reporter asked me. "It's a retractable bridge, perfectly legal on my own property. Anyone who wants to cross it is welcome to ask permission first." "Permission for what?" "Permission to drive across land they don't own to reach buildings they had no right to construct." That's when Beverly made her fatal error. On camera, in front of multiple news crews, she started ranting about her historical property rights and how I was trying to steal community land. "This shoreline has belonged to our community for over 100 years, she declared. "I have documents proving our legal ownership." "Ma'am, we've seen some questions about the authenticity of those historical documents," the reporter pressed. "Those questions come from people who don't understand local history. Our mining rights are completely legitimate." I waited for the perfect moment, then pulled out Derek's survey and the forensic document analysis. "Actually, I'd like to address those historical claims," I said, unfolding the official boundary map in front of the cameras. The reporters gathered around as I explained how Beverly's mansion sat entirely on my property, how her documents were proven fraudulent, and how she'd been avoiding taxes on stolen land for years. Beverly tried to interrupt, but the evidence was overwhelming. Professional survey versus fake historical papers, government coordinates versus coffee-stained templates, certified forensic analysis versus Beverly's increasingly frantic explanations. "Ma'am, are you saying these boundary coordinates are incorrect?" the reporter asked. "I'm saying my attorney will handle this situation appropriately," Beverly snapped, then stormed back to her Mercedes. But the damage was done. Beverly had publicly doubled down on claims that were about to be demolished in front of 200 witnesses. Tomorrow's gala would finish what she'd started. Saturday afternoon, Beverly transformed her stolen mansion into a spectacle that would have impressed European royalty. The bass thump of her sound system echoed across the lake as catering trucks arrived with enough champagne and lobster for a diplomatic summit. Expensive perfume and cigar smoke drifted from the shoreline as guests in designer evening wear gathered around Beverly's community preservation success story. I positioned myself with perfect sight lines to both the bridge and the mansion, watching luxury vehicles cross my property like it was a public highway. Mercedes, BMWs, Lexuses, 200 wealthy donors driving across land they had no right to access, heading to a party celebrating the theft of my inheritance. Beverly had outdone herself with the guest list: county commissioners, local business leaders, and what appeared to be half the Colorado Springs social elite. The local TV news crew set up for live broadcast coverage of the community property preservation celebration. But it was Beverly's speech that sealed her fate. Standing on her mansion's deck with a wireless microphone, designer dress sparkling in the evening light, she addressed the crowd with absolute confidence. "Welcome, friends, to this beautiful community space that we've preserved for future generations," Beverly began, gesturing toward the lake that reflected her stolen empire. "Some people just can't accept that certain lands belong to the community, not selfish individuals who want to monopolize our natural resources." The crowd murmured approval. These were people who understood property development, zoning battles, and the importance of preserving community assets. They had no idea they were applauding systematic theft. "Our historical mining rights date back to the 1880s, Beverly continued, holding up those same fraudulent documents that had been forensically debunked. "Despite outside interference from people who don't understand local history, we've successfully protected this precious lakefront for everyone to enjoy." That's when the Channel 9 reporter approached me with a live camera. "Sir, you're the property owner who's been challenging these community claims. What's your response to Mrs. Sinclair's statement?" Perfect timing. Beverly had just publicly repeated the same fraudulent claims on live television in front of 200 witnesses while standing on my stolen property. "Well," I said, unfolding Derek's certified survey map, "I think Mrs. Sinclair's community deserves to know the truth about those historical claims." The camera focused on the official document as I explained the forensic analysis, the fake watermarks, the impossible font dates. Beverly's 1880s mining agreements printed on paper manufactured in 2019. "But more importantly," I continued, pointing toward the bright orange survey stakes Derek had placed along the actual property line, "every single structure you see behind me, the mansion, the marina, the helicopter pad, sits entirely on my private property. Not 1 square foot belongs to any HOA." The reporter's eyes widened. "Are you saying this entire event is taking place on illegally occupied land?" "I'm saying Mrs. Sinclair built a $3.2 million mansion on property she never owned, using documents she knew were fraudulent, while avoiding property taxes on stolen real estate." Beverly noticed the interview and started walking toward us, microphone still in hand, designer heels clicking on the deckboard she'd installed over my land. "That man is mentally unstable," she announced to anyone within hearing range. "He's been harassing our peaceful community with frivolous legal claims and building dangerous devices designed to hurt innocent residents." The TV reporter turned toward Beverly. "Ma'am, we've examined the boundary survey and forensic document analysis. Can you respond to claims that your historical mining rights are fraudulent?" "Those claims come from people who don't understand property law," Beverly insisted, her voice carrying across the crowded deck. "Our community has maintained this land as a public trust for over a century. We're protecting it from individuals who want to destroy our environmental preservation efforts." I checked my watch. Perfect timing. The last guests had arrived, all vehicles were across the bridge, and Beverly was broadcasting her fraudulent claims on live television. Time to demonstrate who actually controlled access to this property. "Mrs. Sinclair," I called out, loud enough for the news microphones to pick up, "since you're so confident about your property rights, would you mind explaining why you never bothered to survey before building that mansion?" "We didn't need to survey community property," Beverly shot back. "The boundaries have been established since the mining era." "Actually," I said, walking toward the hidden hydraulic controls, "let me show everyone what a real property boundary looks like." Beverly sensed something was wrong. The confident smile faltered as she watched me approach the tree line where I'd hidden the bridge controls. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Exercising my property rights." I pressed the button. The hydraulic system worked flawlessly. 30 seconds of mechanical precision as the bridge's center span dropped into the creek bed, leaving a 6-foot gap that transformed 200 luxury vehicles from status symbols into expensive paperweights. Mercedes, BMWs, and Lexuses stranded on the wrong side of water that suddenly felt as wide as an ocean. The silence was beautiful. Beverly's sound system still thumped bass across the lake, but conversations stopped dead as 200 wealthy donors realized they were trapped at an illegal party with no escape route. "What did you do?" Beverly shrieked, her wireless microphone broadcasting panic to everyone within half a mile. I walked back toward the crowd, Derek's survey map still in hand, speaking directly to the news camera that was capturing every word. I exercised my legal right to control access to my own property. This bridge sits entirely on my land, just like that mansion behind you. Beverly's designer heels clicked frantically across the deck as she tried to process what had just happened. You can't do this. These are respected community members. Actually, Beverly, here's the certified boundary survey showing that every person at this party is currently trespassing on my property. I unrolled the massive survey map, each coordinate backed by federal benchmarks that no fake document could dispute. The news camera zoomed in as I traced the boundary lines with my finger. Your mansion sits 318 feet onto my land. The marina, 270 feet. That helicopter pad where your guests have been landing, 412 feet from the actual property line. The crowd gathered around the survey map, county commissioners and business leaders suddenly very interested in legal documentation. These were people who understood property values, development costs, and liability issues. They were also people who now realized they might be accessories to systematic theft. This is impossible, Beverly insisted, but her voice carried less confidence now. I have historical mining rights dating to the 1880s. You mean these documents? I pulled out Dr. Peterson's forensic analysis. Printed on paper manufactured in 2019, using fonts invented in 1991, notarized at a UPS store last month. Sheriff Martinez chose that perfect moment to arrive. Having received my call 20 minutes earlier, he walked across the creek using a small hiking bridge I'd built 50 yards upstream, my backup access route that Beverly had never discovered. Evening, folks, Sheriff Martinez announced, his voice carrying easily across the trapped crowd. I have some legal documents to serve. He approached Beverly with an arrest warrant, speaking clearly for the news microphones. Mrs. Beverly Sinclair, you're under arrest for fraud, tax evasion, bribery of a government official, and willful trespassing on private property. This is ridiculous, Beverly protested as handcuffs clicked around her wrists. These people will hear from my attorney. Ma'am, your attorney might want to review these first. Sheriff Martinez held up the stack of evidence I'd compiled, survey documents, forensic analyses, tax records, and recordings of Beverly's attempted bribery. The Channel 9 reporter seized the moment. Sheriff, can you explain the charges? Mrs. Sinclair has been operating an illegal development on private property using fraudulent historical documents. She's also been filing false tax assessments and attempting to bribe county officials to modify official records. That's when Beverly's helicopter pilot made things even more interesting. Apparently nobody had told him about the bridge situation, and his fuel was running low after circling the area waiting for passengers. He attempted an emergency landing in the lake, sending waves across the shoreline and soaking several expensive evening gowns. Derek arrived with perfect timing, carrying additional survey stakes and official boundary markers. Sorry I'm late, he announced to the crowd. Had to pick up some permanent markers to make the property lines more visible. He began placing bright orange stakes with GPS coordinates clearly marked, each one driven into the ground with satisfying finality. The visual was unmistakable. Beverly's entire empire sat on the wrong side of clearly marked boundaries. Ladies and gentlemen, I addressed the trapped crowd, you're welcome to remain on my property as long as necessary to arrange alternate transportation. The hiking bridge upstream provides pedestrian access, and I've contacted local towing services to help retrieve vehicles once legal issues are resolved. Beverly, now in handcuffs beside the sheriff's vehicle, made one final desperate plea to the news cameras. This man has destroyed a community preservation project that took years to build. Mrs. Sinclair, the reporter asked, if the property boundaries are confirmed by federal survey, how do you respond to charges that you knowingly built on land you never owned? Beverly's silence spoke louder than any confession. As the sun set over my reclaimed lake, 200 witnesses had documented the collapse of an empire built on lies, fake documents, and other people's property. Justice served, Colorado style. The aftermath unfolded like dominoes falling in perfect sequence. Beverly was arraigned on 12 felony charges the following Monday: fraud, tax evasion, bribery, permit violations, and federal land trespassing from her patrol activities. Her attorney immediately began plea negotiations when he saw the mountain of evidence: forensic document analysis, tax records, recorded bribery attempts, and professional boundary surveys that demolished every defense. The state attorney general dissolved Lakeside Estates HOA within 2 weeks, declaring it an illegal organization operating outside its chartered boundaries. Turns out Beverly had been collecting HOA dues and special assessments for property improvements she had no legal authority to manage. Court-ordered compensation came to $850,000, 3 years of trespassing damages calculated at fair market rental rates, plus construction costs for unauthorized improvements. Beverly's insurance company refused coverage for willful and deliberate property violations, leaving her personally liable for every penny. The mansion demolition happened in October. I hired the same contractor who'd built it, and he was surprisingly eager to correct his previous work once he learned the legal situation. Beverly had apparently stiffed him on final payments anyway. Watching that architectural monstrosity disappear piece by piece felt like Uncle Charlie's ghost finally getting justice. The concrete fountain that had drilled into bedrock came out in chunks, the helicopter pad got broken up and hauled away, and the private marina returned to natural shoreline. But here's what made everything worthwhile. Emma and Tyler got their lake back. Their first weekend after the demolition, we set up camp exactly where Beverly's mansion used to sit. Emma caught her first trout from the restored shoreline, while Tyler pretended not to be impressed, but secretly took photos of everything. "Dad, did you really trap 200 rich people at a party?" Emma asked while we were roasting marshmallows over a campfire built on Beverly's former deck. I exercised property rights in a dramatic fashion. "That's the coolest thing any dad has ever done." Tyler, trying to maintain teenage cynicism. Dad basically pulled off a real-life action movie, but with lawyers instead of explosions. Sometimes lawyers are more effective than explosions. The custody situation resolved itself quickly once Jennifer realized I'd actually won a significant legal victory rather than causing problems. Beverly's arrest and the financial settlement demonstrated that I'd been protecting our kids' inheritance rather than creating chaos. But the best part came 6 months later when I established the Charlie Hendricks Veterans Retreat Center on the property. Partnership with the local VA hospital created a wilderness therapy program where combat veterans could work through PTSD issues in the same peaceful environment that had helped Uncle Charlie heal from his own demons. Derek volunteers his time teaching boundary survey workshops for other property owners dealing with aggressive neighbors or fraudulent claims. Boundary respect sessions that show people how to protect their land using proper documentation rather than expensive lawyers. The retreat center hosts 50 veterans annually now, providing completely free wilderness therapy, fishing instruction, and basic land surveying education. Funded entirely by Beverly's court-ordered compensation, her stolen empire transformed into something that actually helps people. Sheriff Martinez still chuckles about the bridge trap whenever we meet in town. "Sam, that was the most creative property rights demonstration I've ever witnessed. Perfectly legal, completely effective, and absolutely unforgettable." The Channel 9 story won a Regional Journalism Award for investigative reporting on property fraud. Sarah Schuyler's follow-up series exposed similar HOA scams across 3 counties, leading to state legislation requiring professional surveys before any community property claims. Beverly served 18 months in minimum security federal prison and was released last spring. I heard she's working at a title loan office in Colorado Springs now, presumably helping other people with property financing issues. The irony writes itself. Last week, Emma asked if we could name the fishing dock after Uncle Charlie. "Sweetheart, this whole place is named after Uncle Charlie. Every acre, every tree, every fish in this lake, all of it carries his memory. But especially the part where you beat the mean lady with math. Especially that part." Next week, I'll be sharing the story about how a retired teacher in Wyoming took down an entire HOA board using nothing but a pocket calculator and property tax records. Turns out Beverly wasn't the only community leader with creative accounting methods. Drop your HOA nightmare stories in the comments below, and if you enjoyed watching Beverly get exactly what she deserved, hit that subscribe button for more justice-served stories. Because sometimes the good guys actually win, and it's beautiful to watch.
Thanks for hanging out with us on HOA Stories, where the HOA Karens meet their match. If this story had you cheering or cringing, go ahead and like the video, drop a comment with your reaction, and hit subscribe so you're ready for the next wild HOA tale.